Greetings, I'm Grin Grimsley and you're watching the exciting first episode of a brand new season of Grin Reviews. If you're wondering why everything looks a little bit dark right now, it's because today we're having a look at Night Driver for the Atari 2600.
When I first started playing Night Driver for the Atari 2600, admittedly my first thoughts were, what the heck is wrong with these game's controls? No matter how I jiggled my pleasure stick, it seemed that the car would just run into the side and explode. But then I took a slightly closer look at the cartridge art, and then I noticed that above the rather cool looking picture it tells you to use with paddle controllers. Considering that it's currently not working too well with the pleasure stick, I can only assume that the pleasure stick is not a paddle controller. So I sent a rather strongly worded message to management asking them what the deal was having me review a game without providing me with the proper equipment. And in the standard style of a bureaucratically ran business, we received our answer in 3 short months. And this is basically where this review becomes 2 reviews, because this is the Atari 2600 paddle controller. Or perhaps, as I should say, this is the Atari 2600 paddle controllers, because they, just like delicious fun-sized Cadbury chocolates coming in a favorites box, come in pairs. As you can see, the 2 controllers, despite initially having their own cords, conjoin at the end, merging into one single plug. I'm rather a big fan of how economical this is, but I'm not a big fan of how unorganized this is. Neither of the 2 controllers say whether they are controller 1 or controller 2, so by the time they've wrapped around the back of your console and come back towards you, it's not difficult to pick up the wrong controller. And by not difficult, I mean as a rule, I have always picked up the wrong controller first. At first I was wondering why this controller was in fact called a paddle controller. I mean, when you look at the pleasure stick, it's rather obvious why it's called a pleasure stick, because the pleasure stick itself is front and center. But the paddle controller's most notable feature is a dial. I then noticed at the bottom of the controllers there was a picture of crossed tennis rackets, and at this point I thought I had cracked the case wide open, and this may be the reason they're called paddle controllers. But as any sportswear equipment enthusiast would tell you, paddles and rackets are simply not the same thing, so I'm still at a loss to explain the title. And then on the top left hand side of the controllers is a red button, which I assume performs a relatively similar function to the red button on the pleasure stick. So now that we've familiarized ourselves with the paddle controller, let's have another look at Night Driver. And as you can probably tell straight off the bat, or rather straight off the paddle, that's a sportswear equipment enthusiast joke for all of you sportswear equipment enthusiasts out there, but as you can see straight off the paddle, the game controls a lot better now that I'm actually using the proper controls. Go figure. To make your vehicle move forward, you hold down the red button, and to make your vehicle turn left or right, you simply twist the dial in the direction you want it to move. The use of these controllers for this game actually felt really good and really intuitive, and overall I think it gave a more immersive feeling than simply using the pleasure stick for this game would have. However, on that positive note, the controls do still leave a little bit to be desired. If you had noticed, I mentioned that pushing the red button makes your vehicle move forward. And I said this specifically avoiding the word accelerate, because there's no real acceleration to this game. Your vehicle is either not moving or moving at its top speed, and there really is no in-between. This can be rather annoying if you've crashed and your vehicle is stuck on a curve and you just really need to accelerate only a tiny bit to try to wiggle your way out of it. But with the game only allowing you to go to full acceleration every time you hit the red button, you basically just have to crash a lot of times, slowly inching yourself around the corner until you finally break free. There's just simply no way you can make micro corrections in this game. Another issue stemming from these controls is the fact that the paddles can go full lock, which means that sometimes you find yourself needing to turn but being unable to do so because your controller has reached its turn limit. This can once again be really annoying if you find yourself stuck on the wall and are unable to turn away from it because you simply cannot turn your dial any further. However, admittedly, my dislike for this lock function actually lessened the more I played the game, because it turns out you simply do not actually need to turn the dial much to turn your vehicle around a corner. So once you really start to get accustomed to how much you actually need to turn, you don't really get locked up quite so much. Moving on to the graphics in the game, they are kind of inconsistent. As you may have noticed, the graphics you're looking at on the screen at the moment are a little bit blurry and not exactly high definition. This, however, is not a reflection of the game, but simply because both our new and old capture card really disagree with this game and don't pick up much of an image at all. What this means is we've had to go old school, and what you're seeing is just the product of a camera being pointed at a TV screen. So I really do apologize for that graphical problem on our end. This aside, however, you can clearly see trees and houses on the side of the road, and you can sort of clearly see that the things coming towards you are other people's cars. But these people's cars are one of the things that weirds me out a fair bit about this game. They are fairly detailed despite the fact that you only see them quickly moving towards you, and yet your vehicle, which you stare at the entire game, has pretty much no detail to it. I really think that these two graphics should have been swapped, especially because your vehicle really doesn't look much like a car at all. In fact, it looks considerably more like you're looking at the back end of the vehicle you drive in Planet Patrol, which is not a good thing because that game was just awful. On either side of your vehicle, marking either side of the road, there are neon poles, which, as I said, mark where the road is. These are rather simple graphically, but the 3D effect they managed to achieve impressed me a great deal. And also the fact that they are a neon color on a black background really helped add to the sense of speed. While I know I was nitpicking the graphics a little bit earlier, I would say that if I could only really complain and change one thing in the graphics, it would be the fact that there is no real turning animation. Because your car is always in the dead center at the bottom of the screen, and it's the poles going past you that mark how much you're turning, it kind of sometimes feels like you're not turning at all, forcing you to overcorrect. Even if we were given only a very slight turning animation like the banking in River Raid, it would have really helped the illusion on a lot further. All of this aside, however, Night Driver is still a fun, fast-paced, and very addictive game, and I definitely suggest you give it a shot.
So if you're looking for something to do tonight, have yourself a nighttime drive down to the late night video store and pick up a copy of Night Driver for the Atari 2600.